Hello, everyone. I'm Tad Brockway. I'm the Microsoft Corporate Vice President for Azure Storage and Networking. Welcome to our first Azure Storage Day event. I'm privileged to be here to give you an overview of the Azure Storage portfolio. And in my session, we'll walk you through some customer workloads and even meet with some real customers who are using Azure Storage to transform their enterprise workloads. COVID has been very difficult, but it has also been transformative. Digital businesses, as a result of COVID, are now even more resilient and even better prepared for the future. Our enterprise customers tell us that as a result of this accelerated transformation, even more data sets at an increasing rate are being generated, and their on-prem data solutions are insufficient to deal with these trends. As a result, cloud storage has become a very strategic part of every enterprise digital transformation strategy. Cloud storage provides unlimited scale to support unlimited growth. It provides the ability to enable global reach for all of our customers' data sets. It enables our customers to transform existing workloads, but also implement new ones using ultra-modern development platforms. Cloud storage on Azure is secured and protected by the most capable engineers on the planet. Azure Storage uniquely enables customers to eliminate expensive and inflexible on-prem data silos. Once data is in the cloud, data can then become intelligent. It's available to the infinite compute capacity required for analytics scenarios and machine learning. And we've listened to our customers and we've implemented some of the best end-to-end data management capabilities to make all of this super easy for our customers. Azure Storage is durable, highly available, and massively scalable. Our block storage services are designed for business-critical applications like SAP HANA, top-tier databases, and other transaction-heavy workloads. UltraDisk is the highest-performing disk system on Azure. It enables sub-millisecond latency, high IOPS, and even have the ability to adjust IOPS and throughput based on the demands as they change for a given workload. For Windows and Linux clustering scenarios, our disks platform supports shared disks so that all the clustering capabilities that you require and familiar with on-prem, they're all available to you in the cloud as well. Our Azure Blob and Data Lake storage areas, they provide exabyte scale for unstructured data sets, and Azure Data Lake Storage in particular is the foundation for all analytics workloads on Azure. All Microsoft Analytics services, as well as third-party services, they build on top of Azure Data Lake Storage, including Synapse, Databricks, and HD Insight. Azure Data Lake Storage and our Blob API support a premium tier, which gives very high-performance access to your data sets, and we have the ability to access those data sets using multiple protocols. So for the same data sets, you can access your data using NFS, HDFS, our Blob API. And you can go into the system using one protocol, you can access using a different protocol. This combination of features enables the only true enterprise data lake storage platform on the planet. Azure Files and Azure NetApp Files are for files-based workloads, of course. Azure Files was implemented by the engineers who invented SMB. NetApp Files was implemented by NetApp, of course, and is delivered in partnership by Microsoft Azure engineers. The Azure File Sync service can be used to synchronize on-prem Windows Server-based file assets and to create mirrors of those assets in the cloud in the form of virtual file servers. The synchronization happens in real time. It's multi-master, so data sets that are touched on-prem can be accessed in the cloud nearly immediately, and vice versa. Azure Storage continues to deliver best-in-class cloud storage perf, scale, and reliability. The Azure Storage platform is an exabyte scale platform, today with 200 trillion objects stored and more than 500 trillion transactions per month. Azure Disk Storage and Azure NetApp Files provide sub-millisecond latency. Azure Blob Storage ingresses and egresses more than 1 exabyte per day. Azure Files offers more than 100,000 IOPS, and Azure Disk Storage, uniquely in the market, has a 0% failure rate, unlike any other cloud storage service out there. In terms of key customer workloads, apps are being transformed to the cloud, and native cloud apps are also being developed. All this app and user data needs to be factored into a cloud storage strategy. Backup and archive are essential IT workloads, and data protection as well as long-term data retention also needs to be factored in. Increasingly, we're seeing HPC workloads being moved to Microsoft Azure. Customers like the advantage of the infinite elasticity of cloud compute, and with that, they require a high-perf, high-scale data platform underneath. And finally, machine learning and AI are increasingly going to become a trend that need to be factored into any cloud storage strategy. Azure Storage is foundational to enterprise workloads like SAP, VDI, and the others mentioned on this slide. Let's dig into how some real customers are using Azure Storage. Ferguson Enterprises is the largest supplier of plumbing and HVAC services in the United States. When COVID hit last spring, they needed to move over 14,000 of their employees to remote working environments, and they needed to do that over the course of a single weekend. With Windows Virtual Desktop, as well as Azure NetApp Files, they were able to do so. And as a result, Azure NetApp Files is now a core element of Ferguson's data strategy. Walgreens Boot Alliance is using Azure Disk Storage and Azure NetApp Files for their global supply chain. As part of their strategy, they needed to move a large SAP landscape from on-prem to the cloud. In fact, they had to migrate around 100 terabytes of data, all mission-critical data, of course. With the help of Disk Storage and Azure NetApp Files, all of this was able to be completed within a 24-hour window. Allscripts was undertaking something that is pretty common with large enterprises. As a result of an acquisition, they had to merge the IT assets from two different companies. Instead of the traditional approach of buying additional new physical capacity, they went with a lift and shift strategy straight to Azure. SQL Server was a key workload for Allscripts. They used Azure IaaS and Azure Disk Storage to manage the entire migration, which took only 3 weeks with no data lost and exceptional reliability. Now let's have a conversation with Javier at Mediterranean Shipping Company, and we'll learn how Mediterranean Shipping Company is using UltraDisk and shared disks for their mission-critical applications. Now we're joined with Javier Bichegas. He's an IT director for Mediterranean Shipping Company. And as I understand it, Mediterranean Shipping Company is one of the largest container shipping companies in the world. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, in fact. Good day to everyone.
Wow, that's awesome. That must be, that's pretty high stakes IT then, your role, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. This is something that definitely we need to have, our whole IT environment to support the whole line of business operation.
Okay, so you're providing IT services and infrastructure related to the core business of Mediterranean Shipping Company, which is moving goods around the globe. Is that right?
Yes, yes. In fact, as my position as DBA and BI Global Services IT Director, I'm in charge of taking care of all the operational databases around the globe, and as well as the BI systems.
Okay, that's great. So these are business critical apps, pretty obviously. And can you tell me about some of the use cases that are interesting from a Microsoft Azure standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the main tasks that we have over the last few years and for the next upcoming years is to migrate our on-premise operation to Azure. Right? We started that journey already, and we are progressing quite well, I will say. From what respect to my area, moving SQL servers on-prem to Azure is one of the biggest challenges that we have, and this is what we are on board these days.
Yeah, this shows up a lot in terms of enterprise IT transformation. the migration of on-prem SQL into the cloud. Can you share a little bit how are those databases being used for your core business?
Mm-hmm. Well, MSC has operations in 155 countries around the world, right? Mm-hmm. So each country has multiple agencies, and on these agencies we have the line of business application, right? For some of the largest agencies, we have SQL Server clusters running locally in those countries. And basically what we are doing these days is moving the whole operation, not just SQL Server, but also all the satellite servers and applications that are around this critical environment to Azure, right? So this is what we're doing these days.
That's great. And then what are just to give a little bit more kind of a deeper understanding of the workloads, what sorts of data are you storing in those databases? I'm just trying to connect. I know they're mission critical. These are mission critical apps, no question about that. But what, like if there were downtime or data loss, what could that mean for your business?
Mm-hmm. But definitely what we're storing in these SQL servers is OLTP workload, right? This is what we have running all around the world. And what we've been trying to do over the last several years is accomplish high availability with disaster recovery, including minimum data loss, as well as security, something quite important these days, right? So those are mainly the use case. We have heavy transactional data on this different environment, as well as the whole BI solution, right? Which is, of course, using our different SQL servers as data source.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that these are clustered SQL servers. Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting. Mm-hmm. You share a little bit about the Azure Disks platform in terms of how it's set you up to migrate those clustered servers over.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, you know that Azure Shared Storage is one of the most recent inclusion in the Azure Storage portfolio. And this is something that we were looking forward. And actually, we were early adopters and working closely with Microsoft in order to, being able to have this shared storage disk up in the cloud, right, to be able to lift and shift our SQL Server failover cluster, right? This was quite challenging at the beginning because we had to, start moving our environment initially without the shared storage options. But now, since last year, this is something that is fully available in all the regions, and we are taking a good advantage. And this is allowing us to literally lift and shift our SQL Server workload from on-prem to Azure VMs running as clusters.
That's great. The lift and shift is it's a necessary part of any IT transformation strategy, and then over time those workloads can get optimized and so on. But they need to be moved with the least amount of investment from a developer standpoint. And so we've invested a lot in making sure that Azure is as compatible with on-prem software infrastructure as we can. The shared disks support. So what did you have to do to kind of work around that feature not being available before we opened it up for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, what we did is we tried to put some of the agencies with medium-sized workload, right, up in Azure, using premium disk and using SQL Server availability groups in order to accomplish high availability and disaster recovery. This is a technology that we've been using for years also to accomplish side-to-side high availability, right? But SQL Server running on cluster is something that we feel really comfortable, right? Since many years. So this was something that we were really eager to have it. But going back to your question, just with the possibility of having virtual machines in different regions and different zones with dedicated storage and availability group and some adjustment to our application, right? It was the workaround we got in order to be able to move those workloads before the shared disks were available.
Okay, and then with shared disks, that reduces some of the friction to get those work. Oh, fantastic!
Completely.
Yeah, I love it whenever our team does some work, and then that shows up in making the lives of our customers easier. So this is great to hear for sure. I understand you're using a mix of different disks offerings to support different price performance requirements. Is that right?
Absolutely, yes. We are taking advantage, I will say, the whole portfolio, right? Starting from premium disk, using this premium disk as stripe volumes, as well as ultra disk. This is to be able to support all the different workloads that we have in different countries, right? So yeah, we go from, let's say, a single P30, P40 disk to an ultra disk. And the advantage is the flexibility, right? So it's extremely easy to adjust your IOP needs to all the offers that Microsoft provide in Azure.
So specifically related to UltraDisk, can you share, was there any sort of a performance degradation as you moved from on-prem with these probably dedicated SAN or NAS environments, as you move those workloads onto Ultra in the cloud? How did it perform relative to on-prem?
Okay, that was challenging at the beginning because now you have new variables to consider when you are measuring the whole storage solution and the overall performance impact, right? So you have the performance itself with the different workload as well as a cost involved, right? So being able to do our homework initially to understand completely which were the requirements in terms of I/O help us to choose the right tier in Azure when we move to any of the storage, the shared storage and the dedicated or isolated disk, right? So, but again, the flexibility of the different choices is what is helping us to stay with the performance that we were on-prem, and in several cases, see some benefits of the whole platform in Azure.
That's great. You're obviously a very sophisticated Azure Disks customer. We love that. Can you share, you've been on Azure for a while, I believe, MSC has. How has that gone for you? And how do you think about Microsoft as a cloud partner?
Well, definitely, Microsoft is a lead in the cloud infrastructure, in the cloud offering, right? For us, as a big customer that need to be able to quickly innovate, modernize, and reach different parts of the world, Azure was and is a key piece of our infrastructure, right? When we have to deploy something that before it, could take several months because of, buying the hardware, etc. Now with few clicks, we can deploy VMs with SQL servers and others infrastructure-related application servers really quick, right? So this flexibility that Azure provides to the whole infrastructure, and for us as DBA or SQL Server professional, is extremely wide, and it's helping us to do our job better. Because every time that I get this question, what do you do? Well, I try to make our SQL servers to run smoothly, and by smoothly I mean highly available, without data loss, and securely, and with good performance. I believe that Microsoft Azure is a big part of this, helping us to accomplish our job.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you look ahead to the future in the next few years for MSC and IT, what are some challenges and maybe even opportunities in terms of how cloud can help you with your business, maybe with an orientation around Azure Storage, if you have any thoughts there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I believe that the flexibility that we have today with Azure Storage is allowing us not only to move or migrate our existing workload, but also think on new possibilities, right? Mm-hmm. Again, what I said earlier about the possibility of, in few clicks, have a full environment deploy app in Azure is giving us a bunch of advantage on this new deployment. In terms of disk, in terms of the Azure Store offering, I see that every so often Microsoft is providing more offering in different regions, which is something that for us as a global company that we have presence all around the world is extremely important. This is something that I consider like one of the key things, right? Being able to have different offerings distributed around the world and with a ton of flexibility.
Okay, that's great. And thank you so much, Javier, for being an Azure customer. We really appreciate your commitment to the platform and the good work that we're doing together.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Audi's advanced driver assistance systems help keep drivers safe and make driving easier. Audi chose blob storage for their simulation data as part of their ADAS journey. Azure Blob Storage gave Audi the scale they needed, the access to high-performance compute, and access to all of the innovations happening in our cloud. Azure Storage has allowed Audi to focus on driver safety, leaving the details of cloud storage to Microsoft. Marks & Spencer is a leading British retailer. Like many of our customers, Marks & Spencer has many different departments with different data needs and different data silos. With Azure Data Lake Storage, they were able to migrate all of those on-prem data silos into a single enterprise data lake storage platform in the cloud. Johns Hopkins University uses Commvault, one of our key Azure storage partners, to back up all of their data to Azure Blob Storage. So far, they have around 4 petabytes stored in Azure Blob Storage, and around 70 terabytes of new data are being backed up every day into our cloud. Their decision to back up on Azure Blob Storage has helped them reduce their on-prem capital expenditures as well as their footprints in various remote data centers. CarMax is the largest car retailer in the United States. CarMax have built their entire car buying experience on the Azure platform. They use Azure Blob Storage for storing their car videos and images. This video and image data is stored in multiple Azure regions, which maximizes availability for their end customers. Kleinfelder is an engineering company with offices in the United States, Canada, and Australia. Using Azure File Sync, they were able to move from outdated on-prem file servers to Azure Files in the cloud. With this hybrid file strategy, their availability has improved dramatically. Now let's have a conversation with Koen from Tomtom, where we'll learn how Tomtom is using premium blobs for their data-heavy workloads and Azure NetApp Files for SAP. All right, we're here with Koen Dinneker. He's a VP of Platform Engineering for Tomtom, and we're super eager to learn about how Tomtom is using Microsoft Azure.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
All right. Can you share a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. So I work at Tomtom, and Tomtom is a leading location technology specialist. And what we do is we produce maps and we produce location technologies for the automotive and enterprise segment. In my responsibility, I'm responsible for platform, and that includes providing access to storage and other cloud services for our developer teams who are working on products that our customers are looking for.
That's great. Can you share a little bit more about your end customers? What is, how do they use Tomtom? How does it show up for them?
Sure. So we're in the map and location technology businesses, and we have customers that span consumer, automotive, and enterprise. And if we think of the automotive segment, what we see there is that the entire automotive segment is under a lot of pressure to transform how cars are being used these days. It's more of a connected vehicle. If anything, it's almost a computer on wheels. Services are online, and we've got new use cases such as EV, electric vehicles, as well as autonomous driving. And what these use cases do is they put a lot of pressure on the automotive segment to innovate. And what it means to us is we need to get ahead of that and think of new solutions in partnership with our automotive customers so that they subsequently can plan them for new cars to be released to the market.
That's pretty neat. It's innovation in terms of car experiences at the speed of software innovation, it sounds like these days.
That's exactly it. I think over the years, they became really, really good at mastering the science and getting cars reliably on the market. But now there's a big disruption going on, and it's all about being able to be really good at mastering software in a very complex, closed loop, partially connected ecosystem.
That's cool. That's really neat. And of course, the cloud plays a key role in any kind of innovation that involves essentially a big mobile device, I guess would be a way to look at it.
That's very fair to say. Our cloud journey started with infrastructure. And for a long time, I thought that network engineers were the most conservative. But then you start talking to storage engineers and you realize, wow, we can lose data. And that's even worse than having a network disconnect. And that's where the journey started. And we were looking for reliable infra. Storage services have to work. But on top of that, it's got to scale up and down because our workloads are not static. And not in the least, we've got to be able to scale out what we do. Because the use cases we have really put us at the limits of technology. And we were struggling internally to stay on top of it. So that gives us that foundation for us to build and run and deliver services. And that goes in balance then with the innovation charter. Our scarcest asset is our engineers. And the better our engineers are equipped to develop new services, make our maps better, the better it moves our competitive advantage forward. And core to us for innovation is quality time for engineers to focus on the core task. Having access to an ecosystem of innovative tools, including a developer experience, including, for example, data analytics platforms. And on top of that, because data is so core to what we do, the ability to share that data with multiple engineering teams at the same time without having to coordinate or do infra tinkering really helps us to innovate in parallel.
That's cool. So reliable and flexible cloud storage, it sounds like, and that's certainly the business that we're in. I understand you're using premium blobs, which is pretty neat. Can you share a little bit about that? And I think it's for your analytics workloads, if that's right.
Yeah, we're using a couple of your offers. One specific use case we were challenged in was our ability to analyze what we call leads. Basically, a map is a giant data structure, and it constantly keeps changing because the moment you push out a map, roads might get added, get deleted. We get these signals, but we need to process whether these signals are worth investing manual time on or possibly even send a car to the location. And so that was a pretty challenging analytics question because we got a large volume. Mm-hmm. And what we ran into was basically our on-prem solution failed to scale. Mm-hmm. And our ETL was going up for transferring the data, and we basically were slowing down. We couldn't have that. And that's where we started to look at the Azure Storage solutions, the multiple tiers that are out there, mm-hmm. and opt in for more advanced solutions that helped us offload that problem.
So how large is your data set?
Well, we've got different use cases, but one other use case, which is where the map is starting, involves basically taking images or video recording roads. You may have seen those cars with cameras. We have millions of kilometers recorded. That is one example where probably we have our largest data set. That's a data set in the order of more than 10 petabyte.
Okay.
That's being migrated now. But for some of the analytics use cases, we're typically in the order of a couple of 10 or 100 terabyte. And the challenge wasn't so much the size of the data store. The challenge was to balance the right tiering in combination with elastic compute up and down. And that helped us to optimize the price performance design point, which is essential if you want to run a commercially viable business.
Yeah, this is great to hear because we've invested a lot in exactly what you've described, this ability to tier data sets up and down from very hot storage tiers down to very cold storage tiers, which if that's a large data set, and so of course you wouldn't want to keep it all at the hottest tier unnecessarily. Can you talk a little bit more about the performance benefits you've seen from the premium blobs tier that you're using?
Sure. Maybe one other use case I'm going to refer to involves the creation of the map so that it becomes consumable in a car.
Okay.
So to take a step back, the original creation is taking the images, putting in a giant data store, that's the 10 petabyte plus, but then we produce a map for internal purposes, and then we package that, we compile that into a form factor that the automotive industry has standardized upon. It's called Ingest.
Okay.
We do that multiple hundred times a year, and that stretched our infrastructure that we had. And by moving to a cloud service, we were able to compile time could take 7 to 8 days. And by moving to storage, so basically the ANF solution in this case, we were able to improve that performance considerably.
Oh, that's great. So that's relative to on-prem?
Correct. In many cases, we had prior solutions on-prem, but we were facing reliability challenges as the use case kept growing over time. And in addition to that, when we need hardware, we don't have enough. And that takes time for us to proceed. When we don't need the hardware, we basically have hardware there sitting idle, and that wasn't cost effective either.
That's cool. And so you mentioned Azure NetApp Files, and we could talk a little bit more about that. And one of the benefits that you've described, which is something that we've designed into Azure NetApp Files, is that ability to create an Azure NetApp Files volume very quickly relative to the on-prem experience of provisioning new ONTAP storage. It could take a long time on-prem, and it's very rapid in the cloud. So it sounds like that's something you're benefiting from. Is that right?
That's exactly right. So that specific use case is interesting because it had a very stringent quality workflow. Because before you put a map into a car, you want to make sure the map itself has high integrity and quality checked and verified. And that workflow relied on NFS. So NFS was core for us to be able to migrate and optimize the cost performance point. Now, what is interesting in this case is that before we had a different team managing the environment and then the application team managing the workload. And that caused coordination efforts. We sometimes needed weeks, sometimes months for everybody to come together. As it migrated, the application team was able to do that without the help of the infrastructure team, other than some engineering guidance. And I can literally quote what the team said to me as we were talking the other week. Very nice. They're very happy with the solution. Knock on wood, but we haven't had a single incident in over a year now. And they're able basically to proceed at the pace of their engineers, not some other team.
This is fantastic. This is, this is great. I'm so delighted that you're getting the value out of these products as we've designed them. So as your teams moved over to Azure NetApp Files in the cloud, what did that do to your cost structure?
Well, it really helped us to turn the fixed cost and variable cost and put it in the hands of the business teams. Because we now dial up or down the frequency of the map and optimize the total envelope. And in this case, there was a significant reduction in the total cost of the solution, because this is a workload that isn't continuous by nature. And in addition to that, the challenge we're facing for us to remain competitive is to shorten the time to produce a map. It may sound easy, but if you think about the end-to-end process, it used to take months, going to weeks. And with these innovations, we're now able to take it down to days. And the market is expecting us to do that in less than a day. But it's a little complicated at the moment to fulfill that expectation.
So we talked about 10 plus petabyte scale. Can you tell me about ingest rate?
For sure. Let me give some context. There is a use case whereby cars, mobiles are on the road. And for us, these are the sensors that help us relay traffic information, validate that roads are still open or got closed, or that new roads got open. We're talking of about over 1 million operations per second. And that is being consumed in real time and written to a high performance archive. That archive is about 0.5 petabyte now. And then on top of that, we use that for replays, in which we analyze and produce experiments. And so that information subsequently used about 100 million plus cars who are on the road and use the information for routing and getting the shortest path to the destination that we use. Similar, we had an on-prem solution, struggled to keep up with the performance. Scaling was a project. And now with moving to cloud, having access to premium storage, the solution is entirely in the hands of the application teams, and scaling has turned into a non-event.
Amazing. That's awesome. So what's a challenge that you're facing moving forward?
Well, if we look at the automotive industry, for example, we see a need for higher density information, near real-time processing and replay, increased focus on quality, and privacy remains and is only becoming more important. What it means to us is we need to be at the forefront of technology. There is no future for Tomtom without cloud, and we do need a strategic partner in that. I'm glad we found one in Azure because we share a lot of common interests. And as an extra, our biggest challenge is also finding and retaining talent, and having access to a modern cloud platform with a full ecosystem really helps us in both attracting and retaining that talent.
That's great to hear. We are super thankful to have Tomtom as a customer on Microsoft Azure. And it's just great to see all the ways that you're using Azure Storage. And it was great to get to know you a bit, Koen, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day for this interview.
Thanks for having me.
Our partner ecosystem is very important to the success of our shared customers. I want to thank all of these partners for your amazing work and your commitment to the Azure Storage platform. Azure Storage is a comprehensive storage platform. Our platform is designed to eliminate data silos, unlock insights from your data, and we have the governance and data management features that make cloud storage easy. Azure Storage can be foundational for running all of your enterprise workloads in the cloud. Our open and broad ecosystem of partner solutions are tightly integrated with Azure Storage services, enabling advanced scenarios and use cases for our shared customers. Thank you all very much for attending this session. I encourage you to explore more deeply using the links on this slide.